right. Hello, everyone. Good afternoon. Welcome to one of the last sessions of the day. I'm so glad you guys were able to join me for this. My name is Jeff Meador. I'm the COO of Portico, and we work in soft skill training in virtual reality. So we have a technology that combines artificial intelligence and machine learning and the power of your own voice to teach soft skills within virtual reality. So I'm going to be talking to you guys a bunch about that today. Before I jump into virtual reality and how that can really affect the training scenarios that we see out there, I want to take a couple of moments and just talk about training in general, just so that we've all got a shared vocabulary and we know, why do we do training? What's important about training? What's really the business issue that drives training in there? So let's take a couple of moments and we can talk about that. And I think the first question that most people ask is training. Why do we even bother? Nobody really gets excited about training and go, oh my gosh, it's a training day. It doesn't happen that often. But there is a reason why we do it. The reason that we do it is good training, effective training, can really bring about changes in people's behavior in the workforce. Good training, effective training, can bring about changes in people, period. And that's why we do it. Good businesses know that the organizational value comes from what people do and how they interact. Your business value doesn't come from the products that you sell. It doesn't come from the services that you provide. It comes from the people who are creating those products and the people who are managing those services. That's what's important. The other thing is businesses are greedy. And so the only reason that learning functions exist is to drive business outcomes. So we're seeing that businesses want to improve their bottom line in a variety of ways. They want to increase employee retention because hiring and onboarding new employees is hard. They want to increase employee efficiency because if people can do their job faster, better, they're going to see better results from this. They want to get regulatory compliance because they don't want the pantsuit off of them. And they also want brand loyalty. If you can drive really strong customer service through really good training, they're going to build repeat customers, people who are going to come back and buy their products again and again. So that's important. So if this is why we do training, how do we understand when training is successful? And in order to be successful, training needs to be mapped to a specific business goal. Training isn't successful if the entire class gets 100% on the test. That's not a good measure for successful training. A good measure for successful training is, hey, we just went through this training, and as a result, our sales force is 5% more effective. We're getting 5% return on that. We're seeing customer satisfaction scores go up, and as a result, we're seeing more repeat business. So good training has defined business goals, and the success of that training is going to be measured by the business that is generated there. And it really, what we're looking for here is a change in employee attitude. If you go through training, people can say, you know what, I can do that, but that's not what we want. We want people to apply this on the workforce. We don't want people to say, I can do that. We want people to say, I will do this on the job. This is important to the business's success that I perform in this way. Now, that being said, there's a fairly frightening statistic from just a few years ago that only 25% of business managers say that the training and development that they've received contributes measurably to business performance. That's 75% that say it doesn't really work that well or they're not seeing anything valuable out of it. This is a big perception problem. I certainly address that, but we need to take a look at this. So before we get into the VR stuff, and I promise I'm almost there, I want to go over two more quick types here, and I want to talk about two different types of training because this is going to be important in the upcoming discussion. The first type of training is observational training. This is what you guys are doing right now. You're observing something. You are learning passively through me talking to you and watching some amazing, captivating slides that I have curated here for you. You tend to see this in a lot of classroom situations. You see this in videos, manuals that you would read. This is very observational. And this can be a really good form of training if you're looking at cognitive skills. For example, imagine that you're training to become a crime scene investigator and you need to be able to look at a crime scene. Something that is observational is really good for that. If you work in hospitality in the housekeeping department and you need to be able to go into a hotel room and spot what's out of place so that you can arrange the room properly, that's a good cognitive skill, and observational training like this works really, really well for it. But observational training really starts to break down when we start to work on things where we need to interact with people, where we start to look at these soft skills where we're having conversations with people. And that's where feedback-based training comes into play. And with feedback-based training, this is where the people who are doing the learning are really actively engaged in the process. You'll see a lot of hands-on training. You'll see a lot of role-playing in this, some things that are very activity-based. There's tests involved usually. Boo, yuck. But even within feedback, there are two different types of feedback that I want to talk about. The first is aggregate feedback. When we're talking about aggregate feedback, this is feedback that is accumulated over time, and it could be for you personally or for the class. A typical situation where you would see aggregate feedback is in a role-playing exercise. If we were to do a role-playing exercise in this class, I say, everyone pair up and I want you to have this conversation and role-play this scenario with one another. And I would walk around the classroom and I would observe. And then at the end of that, I would say, okay, class, everybody did very well. Here are some things that I saw, generally speaking, in the class. That's helpful, but it's not engaging people in a way that is relevant to them. Because what's happening is they're left to question, wait a minute, you told me that using negative statements was bad. Was I using negative statements? I don't remember. Was I using negative statements? Hey, was I using negative statements? You don't really remember, and so you lose the relevance. So people don't retain that knowledge very well. When we look at things with immediate feedback, then the feedback is immediately available. People are able to see and have that relevant knowledge of, hey, this is applicable to what I just did and what I just said. There is some science behind this as well that involves a lot of neuroscience that I am not very good at, but I do know that it engages the same part of the brain that to do the skill as it does to learn the skill and to receive the feedback for the skill. So in that case, you're actually engaging the right memory sensors in there, and what you see as a result is retention rates from immediate feedback type training. That type of retention goes up 70 to 90% usually. All right, with that said, let's talk a little bit about virtual reality and how we're able to solve some of the problems that I was talking about earlier, where we've got problems with retention, problems with people seeing the value of training. First and foremost, we're seeing a lot of increased engagement with virtual reality training. Right now, we're getting a little bit of a pass on that because, VR is shiny and new and everybody wants to try the headset on. And that's great, and that's gonna last for a little bit, but we shouldn't coast on that. What we're also able to do within virtual reality is create truly engaging content, things that people can look at and understand and start to connect to and say, this is something that I recognize in the workforce. So contextual cues that we can give them, that's really important. So if you are working in a McDonald's and you start to see Burger King logos, that's bad. You want to make sure that this is an environment that is familiar to people. Second thing is we can develop our skills in a safe environment. I like to say, hey, what if I wanted to learn how to run a nuclear power plant and I just started pressing buttons? You don't want to put me on the real power plant to do that. You want to create a safe environment where it's okay to make mistakes. And that's what you get in virtual reality. Nobody gets hurt, nothing happens. You can always reset the scenario. So everything is a very safe environment for learning. So a lot of times people have to learn on the job and they have to learn while they're doing it. We're able to create that scenario so that when they do get on the job, they're a lot more efficient with that. Virtual reality is amazingly scalable as well. Yes, right now there is a problem of businesses adopting the hardware, but a lot of the training stuff that we're talking about is a software solution that's built on top of that hardware. So as businesses start to adopt more and more of the hardware, we're going to see the training scale infinitely through there because all it is software installs. And with that, we're also getting easy access to training. So people are no longer limited to, well, when does the trainer come in? When am I going to be able to talk with the trainer about this particular scenario? The training is always available. All they need is access to that specific headset and the software, and they can go in and start to run their software, run their training scenarios immediately. Finally, we're looking at things that are repeatable experiences. Oftentimes when we're dealing with training, we need things to be exactly repeatable. We want to compare apples to apples. We want this scenario to be exactly what we're going to see in the real world, so we can create that exact repeatable experience. But what we're also seeing is things don't always go as planned, so we need to be able to put some sort of variety in there. And so with virtual reality and the software that we're using for that, we're able to create variety of experiences as well. So at Portico, again, what I mentioned earlier is we're focusing completely or almost completely on soft skill training. So these are conversations. How do you have some sort of conversation, whether it's transactional or managerial, with another person in virtual reality? And we're using a combination of artificial intelligence, machine learning, and your own voice. So we have virtual avatars that appear in a very realistic, immersive virtual reality experience. And these avatars can represent guests, clients, customers, other employees, and they'll talk with you. They'll have a conversation. So we're able to look at things like, how do I check a guest into a hotel? There's not a manual, there's a little bit of manual dexterity that's involved with this. I need to get a credit card, I need to check your ID, but it's really about asking questions. It's about having a conversation. And that's what's important to us, is how do we build that conversational element in here? But more importantly, how do we take that conversation and map it back to business processes and organizational values so that we're seeing an added benefit come out of that? And we're creating a lot of data points throughout this, and we're able to provide both immediate and aggregate feedback for this. And the immediate feedback, I'm going to show you an example of it here in just a moment. We're able to show people exactly what they're doing wrong, what they're doing well, and they're able to change their performance based on that. I want to take a quick moment and just show you a little bit. This will only take a moment of what I mean here, just so that we're all so that you've got a good sense of what we're doing.
Excuse me, I can't find my server. Do you know where she is?
No, I don't. Let me go find her for you.
Okay, but I'm in a bit of a hurry.
So what we're able to do is we're able to have this conversation, a very riveting conversation, granted, but we're able to highlight certain areas of improvement on there. And we're able to put that right back in front of the user right away. You can go back and try again. I think this is playing. No, I don't think it's playing.
Excuse me, I can't find my server. Do you know where she is?
I'm so sorry. I haven't seen her. Is there something I can help you with?
Can I get a coffee, please?
Coffee? Absolutely. Do you take it with cream and sugar or just plain black?
Just black, please.
Absolutely.
So again, we're able to identify different areas where you can go in and improve your conversation here. And finally,
Excuse me, I can't find my server. Do you know where she is?
I'm so sorry. I can go find her for you. But in the meantime, is there something I can help you with?
Can I get a coffee, please?
Would you like a latte, cappuccino?
Just coffee, thanks.
Regular or decaf?
Just regular, please.
Wonderful. Can I get you anything to eat?
I'll have the eggs Benedict, please.
Delicious. I'll let your server know, and I'll put that order in for you right away.
Thank you.
So with that, we're able to see that there's a progress of conversation through there. And we're able to track specific things that you're saying. There we go. Wanted to make sure I got off the video slide there. We're able to track specific things that you're saying and provide contextual feedback for you. You can go back, try it again, and all of a sudden your conversation skills build. So we're collecting a lot of data in here. And the nice thing about the data that we're collecting is it reduces the subjectivity of the results. So this is all objective data that we're capturing in here. Like I said before, we're mapping all of these statements back to business process. So we were able to identify in the first scenario, hey, you know what? That guy, who was me, kind of shirked his responsibility there and said, oh, I'll just go find your server. This is not my problem. That's not really a good way to handle customer service. If somebody is telling you that they've got a problem, you should address that right away. What is it that you can do to make that situation better? How can you take a negative situation and turn it into a positive? And we're able to show that here in VR and have avatars that are reacting and showing you what happens if you perform well or if you perform poorly. Also, the entire session is recorded for immediate playback. We can identify specific moments where you've deterred from standard operating procedure and show you exactly in the playback of the video where that's happening. Because it always happens, and I say this all the time. I didn't say that. I don't remember what I said 15 seconds ago. I can barely tell you what I'm saying right now. And people just have this forgetfulness about them. And here we're able to show them exactly how they behave in certain situations. And this is crucial for people to be able to see themselves, because now they're able to see how this affects the business. They're able to see how this affects their performance and how this affects the people that they're interacting with. The other thing that we do is we don't only track what is said, we track how it is said. So we're looking a lot at sentiment detection right now. Are you saying things in a positive way? Are you saying things in a sarcastic manner? But we're also able to detect things like how clearly are you speaking? How quickly are you speaking? What's the volume like? If we're dealing with a de-escalation situation and you have a customer that's getting mad and the customer starts to raise their voice, you don't want to raise your voice to match that customer. That's a really, really bad approach to de-escalation. And we can test and see if you're doing that, and we can report back, and we can show you with data how you're doing that. And we can also test the vocabulary that you're using to make sure that you're using the right types of words. Sometimes, especially in customer service areas, there are certain words that you want to use, certain words that you don't want to use. I know, like working at Disney, they never want to deal with their clients or their customers. Everybody is a guest there. And so they want to make sure that they're using the right words in there. And we're able to identify those and report back on it. Ultimately, what this does is this drives back to business results. So some things that we're seeing are the consistent training of skills that used to be done in isolated training. So with a customer service like the one I demonstrated here for just early morning coffee service, that used to be done with a professional trainer who would come in and do role-playing scenarios with them, and that trainer would come through every 3 or 6 months, and that's how often you got to try it. If you were lucky to be called on during the class, because it was done in a group of about 12 people, and only 2 or 3 of them got to actually participate in the role play. Everybody else depended on observational learning for that. With this, everybody gets to try it. Everybody gets to participate, and they get to participate as often as they need to. So we're looking at right now what's the most effective training time in there, and what's the most effective frequency for training with this model. We're seeing a lot of increased retention, and more importantly, we're seeing application in the workforce. We're seeing people go in who are being trained for the first time, people who are being onboarded with this. They are taking this, and we're seeing a higher level of success right now as they enter the workforce than those who did not receive this kind of training. We're seeing increased employee confidence. With this, people start to recognize this is familiar. And with these types of conversation, the confidence is important. You want to know that you've got the tools in your back pocket to be able to have whatever conversation, to be able to respond to whatever it is that that customer is saying. You want to be able to respond to those particular situations. We're seeing amazing increased engagement during training, and I should also add after training. People tend to talk about this for a while. Oh my gosh, can you believe what we were doing the other day? This was really cool. Again, we're attributing some of this to the novelty of VR. I absolutely understand that. But we are seeing that they are engaged during training as well, and they want to talk about that training afterwards. The other thing that we're seeing is a lot of the value that they see is, I can't believe that our business is taking the time to show us these new tools. This shows that we are valuable employees to them and that they want to keep us here and they want us to succeed and do well. So they're seeing some really good results from that. Again, decreased time and effort for onboarding. We're seeing quantifiable results through these detailed analytics that I've been talking about. And most importantly, employees see the value of their behavior. And again, this gets back to what I was saying earlier. We want people to move away from, I can do this, to I will do this on the job. This is important for me as a member of this workforce to do this so that we as a company can be successful. So those are the big results that we're seeing out of the training, and right now we're running proof of concepts and pilot projects through all of this, and we're going to be launching in a much bigger form in Q1 of next year. I do want to take a small deviation through here and just talk about VR training in general again, about some things that you guys might be doing there. If you guys are looking at training or if you are trying to introduce training in VR, here are the 5 big lessons that we learned out of creating training in general in VR. And I wanted to share these with you because I think they're really important. Some of them are very specific to training, and some of them really apply to many VR experiences. The first thing is you have to create engaging content. And I think that applies across the board to all VR content. But you need to make sure that this is something that really captures somebody's attention, that shows them that there is importance to what they do and that they understand why they're there. This also tags into the experience being relatable. So people must understand all of the contextual cues of what they're doing in there. When they do this, we start to see that that when they move from the virtual experience to the real world experience, that becomes an easily transferable task if we've nailed these first 2 things. So that's what's really important, is creating these contextual cues, making the experience really immersive for them so that they've got a really strong sense of what they're doing in there. The next thing, from a training perspective, it's been most effective to focus on short, specific tasks. I'm not going to go and say, hey, there's a certain time cap that you need to look at in here, but I will say the shorter the better. If there's the opportunity to take one training scenario and break it into 2 or 3 segments, look at the opportunity to do that. People tend to respond better in the shorter scenarios, and this helps deal with issues of fatigue, people being wary of new technology. All of this plays into it. What we're doing at Portico, we've done scenarios that are as short as 30 seconds. We've done them as long as 3 to 5 minutes as well. But we find that when it starts to get longer than that, people tend to get a little bit more anxious, and they really appreciate having breaks in there. So if we can break that down into specific tasks, that also helps us with giving better feedback, because if we're doing a long training session, the feedback that you're going to get really may go back to something that you were doing 15 minutes ago. You want something that's fairly fresh in people's mind. So having a shorter session really, really works well. My favorite one in here, raise the stakes. Absolutely. So what I mean by this is people need to see the value and the consequence of their actions. Oftentimes in a role-playing situation, let's say that I was role-playing an angry customer trying to return a sweater, even though I didn't have the receipt and even though I didn't meet all sorts of return requirements. I might get really frustrated in the process. And as a role player, I might say, at this point, I would just get so mad I would storm right out of the store. And that's great. But it kind of deflates the impact of what happens there. The person who's learning doesn't really see how their behavior or how their conversation caused that sort of behavior, because we're deflating it. We're just describing it, but they're not seeing it. Whereas in virtual reality, I could throw the sweater at you and run out the door and say, I'm never coming back here again. It sounds crazy, but that creates impact. So if we raise the stakes and people can see that, that's really important. Another great example is if you're training somebody on a medical procedure and they try to cut the wrong vein, it's one thing to say, just killed the patient. But if you have the patient start to bleed out there on the table, that gets serious. People start to understand that they need to pay attention and there are consequences to their actions. And when they're not paying attention, or when they're saying the wrong thing, or when they're doing the wrong thing, there is a negative consequence. The flip side, we want to see the positive response as well. We want to see people succeed, and people love to succeed. They really do. So if we can show them the positive responses in there as well, that's really thrilling, and people get a good feeling from doing that. And the last thing I want to bring up is remember comfort and remember patience. So don't start to add things in that don't need to be there. Don't start to add in teleporting and moving around when you don't really need to do that. Don't start to add in necessary actions that don't need to be there. It just creates confusion, and people want to be able to concentrate on the matter at hand. We ran into this recently when we were doing a hotel check-in training scenario. And as part of checking into the hotel, I need to ask you for a credit card because I need to keep it on file here for incidentals. I take the credit card and I need to swipe it through the machine. Now, in VR, I could require that I grab it using the grab controllers. I could put it into the machine and actually operate the machine and then hand it back using the grab button on there. That ended up being very confusing, especially for people who had never been in VR before. And we're seeing a lot of people who haven't been in VR before go through this training. Most people have not been in VR before. And so we want to make this really easy. So we actually removed all of that and greatly simplified the action. So you just need to take your hand and put it near the credit card and it will automatically grab it. You don't have to press a button. You don't have to do anything. You need to put it near the credit card machine and it will process the credit card for you. We're teaching you how to have the conversation. We're teaching you how to communicate with the person who is trying to check into that hotel. We're not teaching you how to operate the credit card machine. That's something separate. So we wanted to keep that really simple. And this makes it easier for people to latch on to. And also, we need to remember patience. This same demo that I showed you here of coffee service, we actually did that with the director of service at that hotel chain. And he got in there and he was flummoxed. He has been doing service like this for 20 years and I haven't seen my server. Do you know where she is? And it was just deer in the headlights because this was so new. So be patient with people. Give them the opportunity to learn about the system. One of the things that we've since built in there is really a time for people to just set up and explore the environment. Because anytime you put on a VR headset, the first thing you do is, whoa, and start looking around at everything. Give people the opportunity to do that. They want to do that. Let them do that. And then when they're ready, they can press a button. They can say that they're ready. They can do something else that lets them get engaged in the process. But give them the opportunity to adapt. This is a brand new technology. It is an exciting technology. It is an effective technology. But we need to make sure that we're patient with people and we're bringing them along with us carefully. And with that, I wanted to open this up for questions, see if you guys had any questions or thoughts about trainings that you guys were doing, and I'd be happy to answer anything from that. Oh, and here's all my contact information if you've got additional questions as well.